Welcome to the Electric Wire Podcast. We bring you news and views on the most pressing issues facing Wisconsin's electric industry, from policymakers, executives, and customer and environmental advocates. Bringing you these discussions, we are the Customers First Coalition. Here's your host, Executive Director Kristen Jilks.
Welcome to the Electric Wire. I'm Kristen Jilks, and we have a very special episode for you today. As the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin, or MEUW, celebrated its 95th birthday on October 18th, 2023, the organization brought municipal utility leaders from across the state to the state capitol to share the benefits of public power in their communities. The day at the Capitol culminated with a parade around the Capitol Square with 81 utility bucket trucks showing their public power pride. This episode features several short interviews conducted on site during MEUW's Day at the Capitol. We include a quick look at some of the utilities represented in the Public Power Bucket Truck Parade, and we'll conclude this episode with a sit-down interview with Richard Heinemann, a longtime energy attorney at Boardman Clark representing municipal utilities. To kick us off, though, I sat down with Tim Heinrich to give us an overview of this day of celebration. All right, I am here with Tim Heinrich, who is the president and CEO of the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin. Tim, we are here at the Capitol for your big day, the 95th anniversary celebration. Can you give us a little bit more background about your role at MEUW and tell us what is MEUW and what you guys do?
Sure. So thanks for being here. I have the opportunity to lead our trade association that represents the 81 municipal electric utilities across the state of Wisconsin. I've been in the role for about 5.5 years now, and just have really enjoyed the opportunity to tell the public power story. And that's what we're doing here today, is to really make sure that we're making sure that everybody knows what public power is. And it just so happens that today is the 95th anniversary of MEUW's founding. So we're going back to our roots. We were founded as an advocacy organization and on these very grounds in 1928. And so it's only fitting that we're back here today to make sure that all the legislators know what's going on and know all about public power. So.
Perfect. That makes sense. So you're bringing in not only municipal leaders, but also they're bringing their bucket trucks from
Correct.
Utilities around the state. What was the inspiration for that?
So I think it was just really an idea about trying to draw some attention to ourselves, basically. I feel like everybody does a lobby day, right? So how do we make the lobby day something bigger? And so, later today, we're going to have the opportunity to have 81 bucket trucks surrounding the Capitol. And I've been telling folks that, we are using this event to toot our own horn because no one else is going to do it for us. And so we're literally going to toot our horns driving around the Capitol today. So
I love it.
So it's very exciting, and the weather's cooperated, and we've got a nice turnout from our municipal leaders, and should be a great day.
Okay, so you've mentioned you're doing legislative visits and a parade, a public power parade. What else is going on today?
So we did a couple fun things this morning just to kind of draw attention to our parade this afternoon, and one of those was that we put out a patriotic display. So we had a 15-foot American flag suspended between two bucket trucks, and it was a great photo op. Unfortunately, the Capitol Police would only let us have it up for about an hour and a half, so it was short-lived, but it did get some attention. We heard from a lot of folks inside the Capitol wondering what was going on. So that worked as intended. And the other part that we're doing is we're offering our legislators an opportunity to take a lift in a bucket. So we have our friends in Cuba City have sent up their bucket truck for the day, and so they're offering bucket lifts. In fact, one of our folks has mentioned that we're kind of allowing legislators to cross that off their bucket list. So
nice.
Literally.
As you're talking with legislators today, what are some of the key messages you wanted to share about public power?
So the good news is that we're not really here because we have any specific ask. We're here just to educate lawmakers about public power. And so we're celebrating public power. And so our messaging really is about the advantages of public power, being locally controlled, being not-for-profit, and our exceptional record of reliability. And so those are the messages that we're carrying, and just really trying to distinguish public power from the other utility types in the state and make sure that our legislators understand that.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So, Tim, our final question for all of our guests is, what would you do if you had all the power today? Which you arguably
So yeah, arguably today is kind of a day that we have a lot of power, and I think I'm just so grateful for the folks that have come out. We've got a lot of our members who have made a commitment to be here with us today to celebrate public power, and I just really think that what we set out to do was to raise awareness, and I think that things have gone as smoothly as we could have hoped. The weather's cooperated, everything's been great. We were able to meet with more than 80% of the legislature in one-on-one meetings and drop off materials, and it's just been a very productive use of everyone's time to help spread the word about public power.
Perfect. Well, thank you, and congratulations on a great day.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks. Next at the Capitol, I chatted briefly with Jill Weiss, representing Stoughton Utilities just south of Madison. Jill also appeared on an episode of The Electric Wire last year, where we shared more background about how municipal utilities operate. To find that episode, look for episode 29 of The Electric Wire from November of 2022, titled Rooted in Community, Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin. Jill, welcome back to The Electric Wire. Let's get a little refresher. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the utility you represent?
Thank you. Jill Weiss, I'm the utility manager or utilities director at Stoughton Utilities. I've actually been there since March of 2019. However, I've been in the electric industry for probably 20 years or so now. We represent Stoughton Utilities. We're actually a utility that oversees electric. So we've got public power there, water, and wastewater as well.
So how long has Stoughton Utilities been providing these services to the community?
We've been since like 1886. We've actually been a public power utility since that long, so a very long time. We have about 20 to 25 employees, depending on the timing, depending on workload. A lot of variety there a little bit, but we always try to be very efficient in everything we do. So we staff, and we keep our staff, of course, but we staff to a level in which our needs are. I think we actually officially have 24 authorized employees. We have basically 8 linemen. We have water operators, wastewater operators. We have a support staff and our technical operations, which basically oversee a lot of our technology. What we kind of come down to is our people are the most important. And then we also have processes and technology to be as efficient as we possibly can be in everything we do. So we have a number of people that oversee the technology piece of it. That pretty much explains our utility.
Perfect. So what made you want to be at the Capitol here today, helping to share the story of public power?
It's critical to, in my opinion, my heart is in public power. We are not for profit, so there's no shareholders or anything else that we need to help and support. We support our community, we support our customers, and I wanted to be here to be able to share that information. We actually have one bucket truck going to be in the parade today. And we're just very honored actually to be a part of this. And recently, as we were going through the history after 95 years, that Stoughton actually was one of the founding members of MEUW. So we're very proud to be a part of this amazing event.
Jill, if you had all the power in the industry, what would you do with it today?
I think I would actually be able to help educate and share what it is that the utility does. And so that our customers and everyone can kind of see the value and even promote the idea of whether I could actually control the type of utility somebody, but to be able to have them understand and actually move to some place like Stoughton because they could be served by us. The rates would be lower, the reliability would be better. I'd like to share that out to everybody and educate kind of on that.
Perfect. Well, Jill, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Now join as we watch the public power on parade circling the Capitol Square, featuring bucket trucks representing 81 public power utilities from across the state. All right, I am here with Tyler Vorpogel, who is going to be announcing the trucks as they come by for public power on parade.
Hartford Electric Utilities is here. Clintonville Utilities, coming all the way from Florence. Whitehall Electric Utility. Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin, City of Elkhorn, and Broadhead Water and Light. Two Rivers or Trivers.
Partyville.
New Glarus Utilities, New London Utilities, Gresham Utilities, Evansville.
With a bang.
Waupun Utilities, home of the best mayor in the state. Juneau, Columbus Utilities, WPPI Energy, Cumberland Utility,
from the Northwoods.
Kaukauna Utilities.
Now we see them flashing their amber lights. Soon, if legislation moving through the legislature comes to fruition, they will be able to flash green lights when they are working in utility rights-of-way.
If you've seen how well it's worked out for other county-owned vehicles, and just another way of keeping our line workers safe and more visible when they're out restoring power. Arcadia Electric Utility, Manitowoc Public Utilities, and Sun Prairie Utilities, New Richmond,
and New Richmond, both represented.
Sauk City Utilities, and Prairie du Sac, Marshfield Utilities.
That's a cool one.
Wisconsin Rapids.
Woo!
Trempealeau Municipal Utilities, and Rice Lake Utilities is coming next. Shawano Municipal Utilities, and Cedarburg,
Muscadet,
and Stoughton.
Wanakee Utilities in their Bolt, all electric.
Sturgeon Bay Utilities, Oconomowoc, Wisconsin Dells, New Holstein Utilities, Kiel Utilities, and Mount Horeb, Menasha, Westby, Fenimore, Boscobel, Eagle River, Plymouth Utilities.
Fitting to end with Plymouth Utilities, Tyler's hometown. You also heard big cheers in there for my hometown, Municipal Utility, Wisconsin Rapids. Now, from Cuba City, we are checking in with George Morrissey, who shares more about some of the safety training that was part of the day for utility workers.
I am here with George Morrissey, who is the past chair of the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin Board. George, thanks for joining the Electric
My
Wire.
pleasure.
How did you feel seeing all these bucket trucks around the square?
Well, if you zoom in, you see goosebumps.
Nice.
It's all about public power is what it's about.
Yes, it was cool to see all the different communities from
Right.
across the state represented. So tell us, George, were you at the Capitol earlier
I
today
was,
too?
yep.
And what message were you sharing with lawmakers?
The visibility and the understanding of what MEUW does for the communities that we live in and serve, and for overall public power. It's a big deal.
So what community are you from?
Cuba City.
And so how far did you have to come today?
Hour and a half for myself.
And have you been up in the bucket truck?
I'm actually a lineman by trade myself.
Perfect. There was a big safety demonstration in Wanakee today. So what are some of the safety messages that were shared today as well?
Electricity in and of itself is very useful but very dangerous. You got to understand how it operates and works, and that's part of MEUW's job, is training of all the municipal linemen in the state. Every one of us want to go home at night, and we all do. So it's key. Safety first, or you shut down, period.
All right, it sounds like you're being called over for a photo, but George, while I have you, is there anything you would do if you had all the power in the industry for today?
There's a pun on the power, correct?
Oh,
Public power and
Yes.
power. Awareness, so everybody's aware of the utilities and what they do is the biggest thing. That needs to be heard and understood as to what we do, and everybody takes it for granted the lights are on until they're not. And then the response time is very minimal, and we're back up and running.
Perfect. We get that a lot. That is a common wish, is to make sure that people understand really the value
Right.
of electricity. So
Yes.
thank you, George. It was great talking to you.
Thank you very much, and my signing off is mahalo.
Mahalo.
Thank you very much.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
It certainly was an action-packed day at the Capitol, and thanks to MEUW for allowing our electric wire listeners to share in the celebration. Now, to round out this episode, I'm proud to share an interview with longtime municipal electric utility attorney Richard Heinemann. Richard discusses more about the formation of many municipal electric utilities over a century ago and shares some of the legal and regulatory considerations unique to municipal utilities. Thanks to Richard for joining the Electric Wire, and thanks to all of you for listening. Welcome to the Electric Wire to Richard Heinemann. Richard is an attorney at Boardman Clark, LLP in Madison, Wisconsin. Richard, thanks for joining.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So tell us about what you do at Boardman Clark in your role as an attorney there.
Well, I do most of my work really exclusively on behalf of municipal utilities and joint action agencies. So right now I'm in the municipal group here at our firm. But when people ask me what do, I usually say, well, I'm really an energy lawyer. And then oftentimes they'll say, well, what's that? And then I have to go a little bit deeper. But basically what I do is advise municipal utilities and then groups of municipal utilities that come together to form larger companies, municipal electric companies, on a wide range of things, regulatory matters, things they might have before the Public Service Commission or sometimes Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or advise them on power supply agreements or asset transfers. Sometimes governance issues come up, a whole wide range of things.
So much like many of our listeners, you think about energy and utility issues almost all of the time.
Actually, I do. Yes, I do think about it all the time.
I love it. So how long have you been working in this space, in the energy space?
Well, I started in 1998. I just graduated from law school, came into being a lawyer a little bit later in life. I'd been an academic previously and had taught for a while, but for various reasons had to make a career switch, and really enjoyed law school, enjoyed Boardman Clark, at the time Boardman Circurian Field, where I had clerked for a summer, but I had no idea that I was going to be doing energy law at all. and I remember on the first day I arrived at the firm here when I started as a full-time associate, Mike May was a partner at the time, and he called me into his office and he said, okay, I'm going to need you to help me with his Section 206 proceeding. We've got a whole bunch of municipal utilities that are challenging a contract that they have with their wholesale provider, Wisconsin Power and Light at the time. And I'm just going to need you to kind of, we're in the discovery process. You're going to have to rein them in now and conduct all these depositions. And I had no idea what he was talking about. It was like literally the first day that I had arrived at the firm. I didn't know what a Section 206 was.
I still don't know.
Yeah, well, we don't need to go into that, but and I kind of, to be honest, barely even knew what a municipal utility was. Like, okay, well, what is a municipal utility? I didn't really know. He gave me a book to read on the history of public power, and I started to kind of get the hang of it over time. But at that moment, I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll just go with it. But I had no idea what they were talking about.
So as we think about the communities 125 years ago that were starting to set their service territory and provide power to their community, how were these lines drawn? How were the boundaries set between a municipal utility and an investor-owned utility that's providing power nearby? Tell us about the time when service territories started to become a little bit more, I don't want to say set in stone, because I know there's still boundary issues that happen to this day.
That's a complicated history in terms of how the laws around fixing territorial boundaries got set. I mean, and to answer your question, they're not set in stone, right? There are laws that are in place that are designed to preserve territory and avoid the duplication of service so that you don't have utilities competing for the same customers. But but how you determine where those lines are set can vary, especially when you have communities that expand, right? I mean, municipal territories expand, they annex territory, new developments occur, and sometimes they occur in areas that are kind of in between, the existing geographical boundary of, let's say, a small town or village and the remote outreaches of a larger electric cooperative or investor-owned utility. And so how do you figure that out? That's an issue that comes up all the time, and there's a lot of case law on that, and there's a whole way that you approach it, and that's something that our firm, assists with from time to time. But back in the day, there was basically when these boundaries were established first, there was a compact and an understanding, essentially, that within a certain community, the citizens of that community were going to be served by the local governing body, and at a certain point, the Wisconsin legislature created a statute, a whole chapter of statutes, in order to sort of lock that in. And in exchange for giving these local communities the ability to serve, they basically said, okay, you're going to also be subject to regulation. And so we're going to create a public service commission. It was called something different back then. And then you had that regulatory compact where they had a certain monopoly territory that was more or less equal to or equivalent to their population center. And again, we're talking about small communities. We're talking, you said suburbs. We're really talking about towns and villages for the most part, or small cities. But basically, we're going to kind of see what that looks like, and we're going to lock that in, and we're going to give you the right to continue to serve those customers. But in exchange, you're going to subject yourself to regulation, so that we can try to keep costs low, or we have somebody kind of looking out for the customers. And that regulatory compact was imposed, in the early 1900s, and has basically worked pretty well ever since. Does that sort of help?
It does answer my question. So, okay, one note. I said the suburbs thing, but I'm from Wisconsin Rapids, which is a municipally served community. It's a public power community.
Right.
I know Marshfield is a public power community as well. There's so many as you look at the map, and no, they're not all suburbs. Sticking with that theme of sort of regulation, I know because if someone is granted a monopoly, it's much different being a regulated monopoly. Because regulation stands in the place of competition when there's not a natural free market. And so regulation is an important part of it. And many of our listeners know that's sort of what Customers First Coalition is all about, is helping people understand the benefits of regulating electric utilities. And those benefits directly go to customers. So we support that regulatory model. And as you mentioned, it's been in place since the early 1900s. It's been working pretty well since then. As you think about utility regulation, what are some of the unique regulatory issues for municipal utilities?
Let's just start by saying that the very fact that that Wisconsin municipal utilities are regulated is in itself kind of a big deal, because I represent a lot of other municipal utilities in other states, Illinois, Minnesota, for example, and they're not regulated by the state. There's no, I mean, they all those states have public utility commissions or public service commissions, but municipal utilities are generally not regulated by them, right? They are regulated by their local governments, by their city councils, or their utility commissions. And it does, it's something that I've thought a lot about, because oftentimes, municipal utilities here in Wisconsin can be frustrated by the fact that they have to answer to regulators, right? One of the issues that we're dealing with right now, for example, is municipal utilities have to go in for rate cases, so it's just like big investor-owned utilities, but sometimes it seems like they don't get kind of first dibs, and they kind of have to wait a long time to get a response and to get a rate case kind of seen through from beginning to the end. Because obviously, when you have major utilities like Wisconsin Energy Corporation, WEPCO, or WPL, or even MG&E, that can take up a lot of bandwidth of Public Service Commission's time. So one of the things we're trying to do is find a way to kind of expedite that, and use the model that has worked well for municipal water utilities to try to kind of minimize the amount of time and keep things as simple as possible. So there's a lot of frustration, right? At the same time, sometimes the difficult choice of having to increase your rates in order to ensure that you continue to make the necessary investments in your system can be difficult politically. And so, I think there's some benefit to basically being able to rely on a regulator to try to balance interests, and then help come up with a rate design that makes sense. Some of my clients that don't have that, they have issues, right? I mean, there are political battles that they have to deal with. So that's one issue that municipal utilities are dealing with. I think another thing that comes to mind that's also really topical right now, that's different in Wisconsin and impacts municipal utilities in different ways in Wisconsin than in other states, has to do with transmission, right? When I became a lawyer in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was really a time where we call it restructuring, right? There was a time of tremendous change in the industry where the top-down, vertically integrated investor-owned utilities that own generation and distribution and transmission, both at the federal level and then statewide, were really being pushed to differentiate, right? To restructure themselves. And in Wisconsin, that led to the creation of the American Transmission Company, a transco. It was a transco legislation in the like 1999, 2000, that time frame. And all the utilities, including municipal utilities that own transmission, had to divest. And then you had this for-profit public utility, American Transmission Company, whose sole purpose was to essentially provide one-stop shopping for all kinds of transmission-related issues. And at the time, municipal utilities, had difficulties, challenges with rate pancaking, with access, with getting the attention of the big transmission owning utility to build a substation or to interconnect properly, and didn't really have access to other opportunities. And with American Transmission Company, that changed. You had a company that was really focused on transmission, and there was a lot of concern at the time. How's this going to work? Is it really going to be successful? Are they really going to have our interests in mind? And fast forward to now, and I think the ATC model has proven to be pretty successful. And in contrast to some of my municipal utility clients in other states where they're still dealing with pancaking issues, here I think most municipal utilities feel like they've been well served by ATC. We have a robust transmission system in Wisconsin. If you need a substation built, there's you know how to get it done, right? You or an interconnection agreement. You know who to talk to, and our municipal utilities have generally, I think, enjoyed a pretty good relationship with ATC, and certainly there's two other transmission companies in Wisconsin too, Excel and or Northern States Power Wisconsin and Dairyland, and they have different relationships, and they can get things done with those folks too. But generally, ATC is the predominant transmission company in Wisconsin, and I think that model has proven to be pretty successful. And so transmission is, not as much contested terrain now at least from the municipal utility standpoint, as it was then.
So, question, can you please explain pancaking a little bit and why that was a problem?
The transmission owning utilities, they also have service territories, and at the time they had the ability to impose transmission rates to get power from point A to point B, that if that power had to cross several different zones, then they had the ability to sort of pile on charges. And so you wound up paying, 2 or 3 times, for the same energy that you were needing to get transmitted from the power source.
And I think for municipal utilities that are smaller, that was almost like a bigger problem because they didn't all have the ability to self-generate enough power. And so they were utilizing the transmission infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is that municipal utilities rarely own their own generation. There are a number of smaller municipal utilities that do have small generation, and then a couple of the larger ones like Marshfield, you mentioned, has a pretty big generating unit. Manitowoc has some generation, but generally speaking, the municipals don't have their own. And even when they do, right, they're not like off the grid, just using their own generating resources. They need to rely on the grid in order to have power supplied coming into their distribution system. So yes, they were very much at the mercy of these larger integrated utilities. And keep in mind that as we're talking about ATC and all that, that was also the time that you had the regional transmission organizations formed, right? MEUW, everyone talks about MEUW now, and obviously, it's just such a completely different paradigm to have transmission basically done through a market now. But what that's done is it's really kind of opened things up. It has allowed more access to municipal utilities to bring in power from other sources, to whether it's a power purchase agreement they have, or maybe they can buy in an ownership share in a big generation plant. But they no longer have to fear that the constraints in transmission are going to make that uneconomic.
We talked a little bit about how municipal utilities are regulated in Wisconsin. Can you just talk a little bit more about what the local regulation looks like? I know many municipal utilities will have like a utility commission. And so the municipal utilities in Wisconsin really face almost like 2 levels of regulation. So I'm just curious what that local level of regulation will sometimes look like.
Yeah, it varies. You have utility commissions, but not all municipal utilities are regulated by commissions. Sometimes they're just regulated out of the city office by the city administrator, and so maybe there'll be a utility committee, but there'll be a more, or maybe the village board would have a more direct ability to actually run the utility. So it varies, right? So there's really, there's some variations of those basic models, but the main takeaway is that not all municipal utilities are run by utility commissions. And I think that I think there are really good arguments for why the utility commission model works better in many instances, but generally speaking, we're pretty agnostic about that, because municipal utilities can be well run, without a commission too, right? What you want is, the one thing you want is for the governing body, whoever that might be, the village board, or the utility superintendent, the city admin, whoever actually is responsible, and then the body that they're working with to make decisions, you want them to be informed, right? You don't want it to be that's typically why we might come down on the side of utility commissions, because oftentimes the utility commissioners are sort of empowered at with just the ability to make business decisions in a really complicated industry over a period of time, and develop the understanding and the experience that they need to make those sorts of decisions, as opposed to just being more at the whim of, of politics or something like that. But the main thing is, regardless of the model, the governance model that you're using, is to make sure that your governing body, the folks, are, understand just the complexities of the industry, and are willing to be educated, and learn about all these new technologies that everyone's talking about, and that are affecting everyone's everyday lives. And that's why that's why CFC, and Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin, of course, and others, WPPI, obviously on behalf of its members, they perform a real sort of educational function, right, to make sure that that kind of information is out there, so that the governing bodies can make those decisions in an informed way.
Yes. Can you mentioned WPPI, and you mentioned joint action agencies right when we first started. And I'm wondering if you could tell us more about what is a joint action agency, and how does that relate to the individual municipal utilities?
Yeah, that's an important question. One thing I really do believe in a lot is joint action, right? The benefits of joint action. So, okay, well, what does that mean? What is joint action? So we've talked about how municipal utilities came up, in these small towns and villages, and they're typically not like large. Right? I think Manitowoc's the largest by population base, and the city of Manitowoc has maybe 25,000 people. So that is one thing they have in common, is they're, generally speaking, small, right? And a lot of my clients, like the village of Viola, have like 700 or 800 people. And so when you're really small, although that gives you the benefit of being like directly, literally wired into your community and your customers or your neighbors, and you're really responsive to their needs, all the things that make public power great. It also has the downside of meaning that you're often just kind of too small to have anybody pay attention to you, right? So or to get the bigger opportunities, or the benefits of economies of scale. And so joint action is a way of counteracting that. And when we talk about joint action in Wisconsin, we're talking specifically about a statute that came about to allow municipalities to form what we call municipal electric companies, MECs, right? WPPI Energy is a municipal electric company. And so there's a whole statute that kind of lays out what electric companies can do. One thing, they can issue bonds, for example. They can come together and form projects, meaning building a generation plant, or entering into some sort of a transmission agreement, or to provide any kind of range of services on behalf of their members. And the statute lays out exactly how you form, right? What kind of actions your individual municipal government needs to take, and then where you need to file that, and then what sort of legal rights that gives you, what the scope of your authority might be. And I think those models have been super successful in Wisconsin. Obviously, WPPI Energy is by far the largest, and it is essentially a public utility that can make decisions and influence actions like the investor owners can. My clients, Great Lakes Utilities, that's another one. They're fewer members, but their members tend to be some of the larger utilities like Manitowoc or Marshfield or Wisconsin Rapids that you mentioned before. And actually, one of the oldest was used to call the Western Wisconsin Municipal Power Group. Now it's called the Upper Midwest Municipal Energy Group, and they came about in the early 1980s in order to be able to enter into a transmission agreement with Dairyland, which is one of the other transmission owners in the state of Wisconsin, to sort of share investment in the transmission system and get the benefit of that. And so that's how they're served today. They're not they're part of MEUW, but they're not customers of ATC because they have a shared transmission system with Dairyland Power, and that they wouldn't have been able to do without the ability to come together jointly, right, in the form of a joint action agency or municipal electric company. So yeah, today I think that there are a number of larger joint action agencies, not just here in Wisconsin, but throughout the country, and they perform a very significant role, I think, in helping to empower their members, smaller municipal utilities, take advantage of opportunities.
That was so helpful. Thank you, Richard. One last question. I heard a lot about this during MEUW's Day at the Capitol. How are municipal utilities funded? Is it through taxes? Is it through rates? I know the answer, but I want you to say it.
Well, they're funded through rates. And this is one of the reasons that makes municipal utilities so great for their communities, right? Because they actually invest in their communities directly through tax equivalents. We call them pilot, right? So they actually contribute money to their local governments. There's a whole formula for how you calculate all that. But whenever we talk about municipal utilities being really invested in their communities, we really mean that, like, literally as well as figuratively, in the form of the pilot. But basically, they're ratepayer funded, right? Their ratepayers are their customers, right? And as I said before, they're neighbors. But so it's separate, even though, and this is a question that comes up all the time, like, what's the difference between a city and a city municipal utility? Like, are they the same thing, or are they different entities? And at the end of the day, what we like to say is that a municipal utility is a department of the city, so it's really a part of the city. And when if they issue bonds, for example, they don't issue bonds separate from the city. It's the city that issues the bonds, right? Because they're the same legal entity, right? But because they're funded differently through ratepayers, through utility revenues that they get from the services that they provide, they're accounted for differently, right? They have a different bottom line. They have a different source of funding. They have different funding needs. So that's an important distinction. Does that make sense?
Thank you. It does make sense. Okay, so I get this question sometimes. If a community wanted to become a municipal utility, is that still possible? Or is it the regulatory compact has these service territories set up and that's the way it's going to be forever?
Well, the answer to that question is it's probably going to be that way forever, but not because you can't do it anymore. It's just logistically not feasible anymore. So what do I mean by that? So you could, so any municipality could decide, if they wanted to become a municipal utility. You could municipalize, right? And from time to time, you read headlines about municipalities that have tried to do that. The most recent example of that is Boulder, Colorado, tried to municipalize. And just a few years ago here in Madison, where I work, there was significant interest on the part of Madisonians and various stakeholder interests to municipalize. They were mad at MG&E for various reasons. And there was some real thought given to the possibility of municipalizing. I think today you hear it being discussed in Milwaukee. And I think that's actually something that still is generating headlines. But as a practical matter, in order to do that, in addition to clearing all the procedural hurdles that you would have to clear in terms of getting the citizen buy-in and all that, it would just cost a tremendous amount of money, because you'd essentially have to condemn the existing utility property, and then you would fight about how to value that for years and years and years. And by the time you got to the end of that road, it really would be a question of whether you've done anything of value for your citizens or not, right? And in Boulder, for example, ratepayers had to shoulder the economic burden of the litigation that ensued, and various other aspects of that effort. And so as a practical matter, it's just no longer really feasible. As much as I would love for there to be, like, I would love for MEUW to have 20 new members.
I know. I was like, that seems like it'd be great for you.
It would be great, but it would be great. I just look. I think the public power model works. I really do.
Yeah.
But we haven't had a municipal. I don't even know the last time. I don't know what that would be. An interesting question. I bet Tim Heinrich knows the answer to it, when the last municipal utility was formed here in Wisconsin. But the last effort to form one, I think, dates back to maybe the late 60s or 70s. So it's
Gotcha. Well, thank you. That does help clarify some things for me. So I appreciate it. Because we're celebrating on the MEUW's 95th anniversary, I wanted to close this on a celebratory note. When you think of working with municipal utilities, what's your favorite part? What makes you love your job?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? I think about it a lot because my kids always ask me, why do you do what you do? Aren't you on the phone all day? That seems like so boring. Why would you want to be a lawyer, working on behalf of municipal utilities? But no, I literally, from that first day that Mike May brought me into the office and gave me that book to read on public power, I just always enjoyed working on behalf of municipal utilities. And if I had to single it, to narrow it down to one aspect of it that I love so much, it's because they're so committed themselves to what they do. I love my clients. I think they're so committed to serving their communities. I mean, they really are public servants in the best sense of the word, and they've always got the interests of their customers in mind. And MEUW, I think, does a great job. I think Tim does a great job in bringing them together and providing them platforms to interact with each other and to collaborate and to learn and to support each other, whether it's from a lobbying standpoint, legislatively, or otherwise. But I just enjoy being part of that because they're so committed to what they do, and it's exciting to me. I think what's happening now, as challenging as it may be, I think what we're starting to see in recent years in municipal utilities, in terms of innovation, coming up with new tariffs, community solar or EV, they really, they really are trying to adapt to these new technologies and find ways to meet evolving customer needs. Still lots of challenges, but they really are committed to doing it. So I love being part of that.
That's so cool. Thank you so much, Richard. And our final question for all of our guests is, if you had all the power in the industry, what would you do with it?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I struggled with that one. And I thought about answering it in a couple of different ways, but I think what I'm going to land on this, which is that because things are changing so much, because we have all these technologies, and every day you read a headline in the local paper about something energy related that's happening, and oftentimes it's very contentious, right? There's an article just in the utility press I read this morning before we started recording this, about the community solar bill that was being pushed by some legislators here at the state capitol that now appears to be dead. And just kind of talking about that. And oftentimes, because we live in such a polarized environment, we see these things in black and white terms, right? That the utilities are just in it for their own interest, and they're trying to line their own pockets, and if they would just agree to community solar, or if they would just agree to third-party solar, everything would be better, and we'd have more, customers would be more empowered. But things are not that simple, right? Things are not black and white. And so when I thought about your question about what I would do, what I really would like to do is get everybody together, right? Get stakeholders together to talk about ways that we can solve some of these problems in ways that make sense, right? That don't require us to abandon the regulatory model that we talked about earlier, because I think that has been successful. And I think that you're seeing public utilities, investor-owned as well as municipals, like I just mentioned, really start to try to innovate and find ways to address customer needs. And so if I had all the power in the industry, I'd like to get everybody together in some way, right? And just talk this through and come up with solutions that make sense, that work to benefit customers, to benefit the environmentalist community. Maybe not, out-of-state developers so much, but yeah, I think we can create jobs. I think we can empower communities and customers. I think there's ways that we can do it if we're nuanced about it and not so polarized. So I don't know if that maybe is a little pie in the sky, but
No, I get it. And I think it's a noble goal, and it's something that we try to help facilitate here at the Customers First Coalition as well.
it's all about, right? That's why I thought that would be a good way to end, because that's certainly what the Customers First Coalition's always been committed to.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much, Richard. And this was super insightful and helpful, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. Please support our work. You can subscribe to the Electric Wire podcast if you haven't already, and you can follow us on Twitter @The Electric Wire. Thanks also to the members of the Customers First Coalition for supporting this podcast. Our members are Dairyland Power Cooperative, Madison Gas and Electric, the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin, WPPI Energy, the Citizens Utility Board, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local 2150, and the Wisconsin Electric Cooperatives Association. Thanks again for listening. We'll have a new episode next month.